Hello everyone, Rose Thorn here. Tonight I'm doing something very special for my channel, something I've wanted to do for a while. As everyone knows, I do love the rock band The Doors, and I love Jim Morrison singing. But what a lot of people don't know about Jim Morrison is that before he became the singer of The Doors, he was a writer and a poet first. And unfortunately, that part of himself did not get the recognition that it deserved. As a result, Jim, throughout his life, being in the Doors, suffered a lot of frustration and anger over the fact that people just saw him as the singer for the Doors and a very pretty face. Well, as a fellow writer and poet, I would like to give credit where credit is due and tell all of you about Jim and his writing. There are many different videos on YouTube spotlighting Jim as a singer, and as the lead singer of The Doors, I am here to honor Jim as a composer, as a writer, and a poet. And so it gives me great joy to tell you about Jim, the writer and the poet, and to tell you all about the books that he produced in his life before he died. James Douglas Morrison was born December 8, 1943. He died July 3, 1971. Jim was that person that, before he became part of the Doors, he was quiet, he always had his nose stuck in a book, and he was always writing. Indeed, he had hundreds of notebooks full of unpublished poetry. Jim always wanted to be appreciated for his ability for writing, so much so that before his death, he self-published 3 different books on his own. Because Jim was an avid reader, he had many different favorite authors, many of which were beatnik poets. For those who do not know about beatnik poetry, it's very avant-garde. It could be radical, political, raw, real, gritty, definitely not romantic poetry. Some of Jim's favorite authors were indeed beatnik poets. To list some of his favorite authors included Charles Bukowski, Michael McClure, William Blake, James Baldwin, Norman Brown, William S., Joseph Campbell, Albert Camus, William Burroughs, and Allen Ginsberg. The first book that he put out, actually the first 2, that in time became one book. The first book was Lords and the New Creatures, followed up with Notes on a Vision. Again, these 2 books eventually become enclosed into one volume. Those were released in 1969. I myself have a copy of Lords and the New Creatures. And just to give you a glimpse into the writing style of Jim Morrison, which could be described as postmodern, perhaps dreamy, perhaps left field. Here's a passage from The Lords and the New Creatures. The Lords. Events take place beyond our knowledge or control. Our lives are lived for us. We can only try to enslave others, but gradually, special perceptions are being developed. The idea of the Lords is beginning to form in some minds, which should enlist them into bands of perceivers to tour the labyrinth during their mysterious nocturnal appearances. The Lords have secret entrances, and they know disguises, but they give themselves away in minor ways. Too much glint of light in the eye, a wrong gesture, too long and curious a glance. The Lords appease us with images. They give us books, concerts, galleries, shows, cinemas, especially the cinemas. Through art, they confuse us and blind us to our enslavement. Art adorns our prison walls, keeps us silent and diverted and indifferent. So in Lords and the New Creatures, there's a lot of talk about cinemas, brief descriptions of places and people. It was some of his earliest work, and there isn't as much structure as far as poetic prose, but there's a lot of color and a lot of imagery, and the poetry in that book, it's the kind that you take away from it what you want to, and your mind goes where it wants to. He's not trying to define how you should perceive that poetry. An American Prayer, the next work that he did, was not so much of a book as it was an actual recording. And the interesting thing about An American Prayer was that it wasn't done all at once in one session. An American Prayer was actually done in 2 different sessions on 2 different years. One occasion happened on March 1969 in Los Angeles, and the second portion in December of 1970. Those recording sessions with Jim made their way onto 2 different projects. The first, the segments from the 1969 session were made into a bootleg album called The Lost Paris Tapes. Then after that, the segments made their way into An American Prayer, which was released in 1978 after Jim's death. The album was released and it reached number 54 on the music charts. Even after Jim's death, his writings, his notebooks, different things he wrote down kept circulating. And there were 2 more books published long after his death. One book called Wilderness was released 1988. It became a bestseller. Then in 1990, another book of his work was released called American Night. So many years after the death of Jim Morrison, his poetry, his compositions not only live on in the songs that he created with the Doors, but in many different books where all of his compositions were put for everyone to enjoy. So for those of you that are fans of the Doors, those of you that are fans of Mr. Jim Morrison, the true fans of Jim Morrison, I absolutely encourage you to not just be satisfied with checking out his music, but don't be afraid to check out his books as well. Because as I said, before Jim became part of the Doors, he was a poet and writer first. That was the true soul of who he was. And before his singing, that was the part of him that he wanted the most attention for. And truly, if you go on YouTube and you check out videos showing An American Prayer, I must say that Jim Morrison has one of the most beautiful voices for spoken poetry that I've ever heard. It is very calming, very soothing, and his delivery is just absolutely flawless. And so, as someone that I admire him for being a writer and a poet, and wanting him to get the recognition for that he deserves, I am making this video. And so I hope those of you that are Doors fans, that you go further than loving the Doors music or loving his singing, and you also check out his writing, because there's truly a lot of beauty to be found there as well. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one.